why I think that we're going through a psychedelic renaissance right now. I think that's why so many people are doing psychedelics. I don't know of anything else that will turn somebody around overnight, like Scrooge in the Christmas Carol, where they just have this one profound experience where they suddenly feel like their heart opening to all of humanity and to wanting to take care of the environment. I don't think there's very much time left right now in terms of our ecological crisis, and I think that psychedelic plants are nature's way of sort of sending out signals into the biosphere, which is the global body, as a way of waking people up. I really think that that's the great value that they have. I don't know of any other way really that has such a quick and profound effect to open people up. Certainly, doing everything you can to communicate what you've learned, to improve communication channels. I mean, the internet, I think, has helped to help expand ideas. But I really do see tremendous value in the psychedelic experience.
Everybody wants utopia, but it's not something that just happens with. It's the head and the heart have to be aligned for that to happen. There's so many powerful hearts in the world who want that utopian dream, but the practical necessity of like human life has put a limiter on that for so long. And I think that finally we're at a place where, with psychedelics and with the internet and being able to have global town halls and just people share ideas that are going to be able to go beyond just cultural echo chambers.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I'm your host, Bernie Beitman, and I like getting out in the psychosphere, which I call our mental atmosphere. It's where entities, among other things, exist that we are only just learning to be able to pay attention to. And our guest today will be helping us to pay attention. Most new scientists begin with categorizing. The ancient Greeks, Aristotle and Theophrastus, pioneered early taxonomies for animals and plants. In the 1700s, Carl Linnaeus systematically approached and revolutionized the field by his categorization. He standardized the naming of species and organized them into ranks such as kingdom, class, order, genus, and species. And now we have the beginning of a new science, categorizing beings without bodies that humans encounter in various states of consciousness. I experience voices from non-bodied beings. Do you? Well, we're going to be talking with people who have categorized many of these potential sources of information to us from what I'm calling the psychosphere. They are David J. Brown, who's the author of the Illustrated Field Guide to DMT Entities. I mean, this is a lot of fun to read this, but for those of us who like pictures, it's got a lot of pictures in it. And Sara has used various tools, including AI, to make these pictures. There's a lot of them. David is also the co-author of 7 best-selling volumes with leading-edge thinkers, including research with Rupert Sheldrake. 2 of his books, and one including Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home, and the other, The Sense of Being Stared At. These are telepathic research between dogs and people and being looked at by people, and an energy between people. And this is all real, but we haven't yet gotten to a place to pay attention to it. Sara Phinn Huntley is an artist, writer, and researcher whose work has explored the intersection of psychedelics, technology, and philosophy for the past 2 decades, pushing her understanding into pioneering VR mediums for psychedelic exploration. She is quite an artist. And if you get the book, the field guide, the illustrated field guide to DMT entities, you'll see how wonderful her work is. You can go to her website and see some of them. So welcome, welcome, and welcome to Connecting with Coincidence, David and Sarah.
Thank you very much, Bernie. I appreciate what you just said, and I'm delighted to be here with you today.
Good.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction.
You're welcome.
Yeah, especially about the taxonomy. That was wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome. That's what you're doing. That's what I'm doing with synchronicities, taxonomies too. It's the way we begin new sciences. So you have a whole set of chapters on synchronicities, excuse me, on angels and other entities, reptiles and reptoids and lizard people, and some really funny ones, that like elves and jesters, uh, and and tykes and clockwork elves and all kinds of stuff. I mean, they got a lot of names in here and a lot of different entities, and it's going to be hard for you to describe all of them. We're not going to do that, but describe some of your um, experiences with these entities. What have they been for you, so we can give people who are not familiar with DMT or other entities like them uh, some sense of what your knowledge is from each of you.
Okay, well, first, maybe I should begin by describing a little bit about what DMT is. DMT is a dimethyltryptamine. It's a substance that's naturally found in the human body. It's found ubiquitously throughout nature in many animals and plants, and no biochemist can tell us what function it serves. It's a profound mystery. But when you ingest it in a high enough quantity and elevate your DMT levels, you find yourself in what people have termed hyperspace. Your entire visual field is replaced by another reality, and your sense of location is completely transformed. And you're in this hyperdimensional, as I say, meaning more than three dimensions. This space that is not only where you can see 360 degrees around you, but it's populated. It's populated with these entities that seem super intelligent, hyper intelligent, and are eager to communicate with you. What's so remarkable is that many people who have this experience report similar entities. There's a remarkable consistency among the reports that people bring back. And what we did in our book was we brought together 25 of the most commonly reported entities. This was gathered from the surveys and scientific studies done at Johns Hopkins University, at the University of New Mexico by Dr. Rick Strausman, and the extended state research they're doing at Imperial College in London and elsewhere. And some of the entities, well, first of all, the entity that I experienced first was what seemed like a giant praying mantis entity that was doing some kind of brain surgery or adjusting or fine tuning something in my brain while I was experimenting on me. And that occurred in 1983 when I had my first DMT experience. But some of the ones that we explore in the book are the self-transforming machine elves, which is a term that was coined by the late ethnobotanist Terence McKenna to describe these tyke or elf-like beings that transform and have this kind of mischievous kind of attitude towards us. The gray aliens, which is an interesting overlap between the alien abduction phenomena and the DMT experience. Reptilians, octopods, like beings, beings with many tentacles. People encounter beings that seem like they're from Celtic mythology or from Egyptian deities or Hindu deities like Kali. Um, So there's this, some people experience beings that seem like they're from Western religion, like Jesus or the Virgin Mary. There's a wide range, but there's a remarkable consistency among many of these reports. There are, for example, many hundreds of reports, or thousands of reports of the different entities that I just named. So it's a real mystery as to why there's such consistency, and it leads one to believe that there might be an objective reality to this, and that's what I think that explorers in the future are gonna help us to understand, and why I think that the research that's going on right now at the Imperial College in London is so important, where they're putting people into this DMT state for extended periods of time, so they can have longer dialogues with these incredibly mysterious entities.
Wonderful, wonderful intro. Sarah, you had your first experience was with an entity, a vibrational entity. Could you tell us about more about that?
Um, well, the very first time I smoked DMT was a very small toke.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have, it was more of like a threshold experience. And the closed eye visuals were very subtle, but it was sort of infused with this sort of mirroring where I saw a vague figure sitting, and I could see like a cardiovascular system and like a pulsing vibration within that. But then it was also mirrored by my own nervous system and my own body. And so it was kind of, that was just like a toe dip into the experience. But the following evening, I had a much larger toke and dose. And I ended up seeing something that to this day, I still think quite a lot about in regards to categorization, because it had a lot of features that sort of are aspects of different archetypes. And so it had a clown-like and jester-like quality, almost acrobatic. And it was rainbow checkered, like a fractal entity. And I could only just make out the very edges of it because the background was also like this large sun-like mandala of kaleidoscopic fractals. And so I could see the edge of it, giving it definition. But then it ended up sort of expanding out a set of multi-arms, like an Indian goddess. And then it started creating glyphs and letters with its body dancing. And I found it interesting because its head obviously had some kind of expansive quality to it. It wasn't sort of defined like, a regular sort of skull or head would be. It looked like it might have a headdress or something fractal, but it was sort of ill-defined with all the movement. But yeah, I proceeded to get this crazy download from this sort of hyperdimensional dancing entity. It kind of like tunnel visioned into eternity, and there were many of them that sort of appeared behind the first initial entity, and they walked me through a history of the cosmos, just the beginning of the universe, and like a just frame by frame being beamed at my face. Eternity. I
One of
know in
the
reality it was about 5 minutes, but yeah. And then
they,
you come back from outer space, and they know it too when you come back. But
they
that was my
know.
first experience.
One of the things about Sarah, ladies and gentlemen, is that Sarah has aphantasia, a thing that does not allow her to visualize images just the way regular people do. But I was trying to track how you were visualizing what you were just saying, and
Hmm.
it looked like you were tracking what you were saying with some visual imagery.
It's strange because it's almost, pardon me, as if having a computer, like your regular desktop or a laptop, but the display doesn't work. And so I can still conjure up aspects of things in my imagination, and I still have a sense of like volumetric or compositional recall from memories. I just don't experience like that hologram thing that phantasic people. Um, I think that's what, and there's aphantasia, then there's phantasia, which is like the regular part of the
Yeah.
spectrum, and then you have phantasic people who can, sort of almost see like an overlay, like an artificial or rather augmented reality overlay, right? They're super vivid imagination powerhouses, where I'm kind of at the dim spectrum. So when I close my eyes, I can't imagine like a red apple or something like that. But my memory recall has a fun, like kind of side loop. And it's similar to, thank goodness, I still get wonderful closed eye visuals and visual experiences from psychedelics in general, which is a big, love and motivation to explore that space. But
Yeah,
yeah, it is a weird little quirk.
it's a weird little quirk. I agree with you. Uh, it's and then here you are doing all these visuals for this book, which are fantasia. I mean, fantastic. The two words are
Yeah,
go together.
thank you.
Fantastic. Um, so my, as I mentioned earlier, the my interest, among other things, in what you're talking about, these entities and what you're categorizing, and which we just did a little visualizing, is that with some of them you communicate telepathically, or they telepathically communicate with you. And I'd like to be able to build on experiences like yours to help us people with bodies walking around here, and with the complexity of having tissue, uh, to learn how to telepathically communicate the way you and others have done with some of these entities. A key part of that, from your book's description, is that the telepathy can be visual. That means for me, it's sending movies of what I'm thinking to your
Yes.
mind. So I'm projecting my mind, or you're tuning into the movie in my mind. You're sitting in the audience and saying, "Hey, Bernard, I can see your picture," and you're also, as if you're wired up somehow, can feel my emotions as I'm talking. And so you're in this theater feeling emotions and watching the movie as somebody is talking, like a narrator over it. How does that image of that I'm David, will start with you, fit with your experiences and the ability for humans to be able to use some of that capacity?
Well, it seems like the DMT entities, as well as the beings that people report encountering in alien abduction phenomena and the UFO contactee experience, tend to communicate primarily through telepathy. It's very rare that you hear about them communicating in English or in the native language of the person. It seems like there's kind of a universal ability to communicate simply through their minds. And sometimes it's my experience is done as you describe with imagery or emotion that seems to be translated. But from in my case, it's really mostly been just kind of an instant understanding. I just kind of understand, and it's very hard to put into words how I understand what they're trying to communicate, but I do. And I also want to just mention that it's very common for people to report in their psychedelic experiences, even when they're not doing DMT, even with drugs like LSD or with psilocybin or with ketamine, where they report telepathic communication with the people that they're with. I've personally had this experience, and my friend Wade just wrote a book called Psychedelic Mind Mold, where he explores telepathic communication and the psychedelic experience. And there's a wonderful. I'm sure you, if you're interested in telepathy, you must know about the telepathy tape, which these wonderful exploration with autistic children who are nonverbal and who seem to have remarkable abilities to communicate telepathically. So my feeling is similar to the late psychologist Timothy Leary, who believed that when you sort of reach these higher levels of awareness, that you activate circuits in your brain where telepathy becomes natural. And it may be that these beings that we encounter in the DMT hyperspace are more highly evolved than us, and they naturally communicate through these telepathic channels, and that may be the way that we're evolving towards in the future. And it may be that this the way we're communicating now with sounds and grunts, maybe looked upon as being very primitive in years to come.
I look at it as very primitive in this year. Uh, it's very primitive. It's these words are so grunts. It's good.
Yeah.
That's
So
good.
clumsy. It's such a clumsy way of communicating when you have, yeah, a lot of profound ideas.
The the value of it for us flesh things is that the words can become a bridge to the other person's mind. That may not be necessary in more highly evolved states, but when I listen to somebody talk and I'm calmed down and not going like this and trying to do, when I'm listening and calm down, kind of the way I'm talking now, uh, and can listen to the words, but the resonance of the words, I can begin to pick up information in other ways. And some of those ways are picking up information in their biofields, in their electromagnetic biofields, because there's a lot of information floating around in there. Pick up information just about how they're feeling from their energy fields. So these proximal human contacts tend to be ways of being telepathic. That means communicating at a distance. I mean, let's look at the word telepathy for a second. Tele at a distance, pathy, feeling. The original meaning of telepathy was communicating feeling at a distance. And there's two kinds of telepathy: the distance of being in a room with somebody, and the feeling of being away from that person. Well, please comment on this, what I'm thinking of as two different kinds of telepathy.
Well, it seems that, I mean, to me, I see telepathy as being non-localized, that it has more to do with your emotional or empathic relationship with the person that you're telepathic resonance with than it does to do with the physical locality or the distance. Because it seems like, and certainly in my work that I did with Rupert Sheldrake, that it seemed like distance didn't play a role, and whether it seemed instantaneous, like there was a non-localized, kind of effect. I'm not sure if that's what you're getting at, but
Yeah,
that's
it
that's
is. It,
yeah,
it, it is. I mean, that's
yeah,
that I tend to be we're here and then we're not here kind of thinking. It's still dual and it's still polarity. But picking up somebody's information from their energy field in the present is still something that I think is different from picking it up at a distance. But that's just the way I'm thinking. Sarah, what's your
yeah.
comment on? Okay, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I just want to, I can briefly tell you an experience that I had, a remarkable experience with telepathy. I was with a girlfriend years ago, and we were doing ketamine together, a psychedelic dissociative drug. And as we were lying there in bed together, I started to hear her voice in my head, and we started to have a conversation. And me being the scientist that I was holding her hand, and I said, if this is real, could you please squeeze my hand right now? And sure enough, she squeezes my hand. And I asked her over and over again to confirm this. I kept doing it. We had this ongoing conversation, and I would say, please squeeze my hand again just to confirm. And every time I asked her to do that, telepathically, she squeezed my hand, which was incredible confirmation. And I was just like, okay, this is amazing. This is kind of what I always dreamed of as telepathy. But the interesting thing was the following morning, when we woke up, the first thing I said to her was, wow, Barbara, that was just so incredible last night. It was just amazing. And her response was, what are you talking about? And, and I said, well, the telepathic conversation that we had and the hand squeezing, and she had zero memory of it. So I don't know what to make of that experience, whether sometimes we have telepathic communication with people on levels that they may not always remember. But that to me is one of the most mysterious experiences I've had with telepathy, because I got that confirmation every time, me being the scientist that I was, and yet in the morning she had no memory of it. So
Well, this is an
what do you,
important.
what do
This
you make of that, doctor?
Th- th- Well, I'll tell you what I make out of it, sir. The what I make out of it is reflected coincidentally with a pretty good synchronicity I had with a good friend of mine. Without going into the details, he had painted a painting that reflected my experience 2 days earlier. And I said, hey, look at that. It's what happened with me. And he says, yeah, okay, that's cool. I said, well, that's a synchronicity that involves both of us. Kind of like these, I'm very interested in shared synchronicities. It's like, so you can talk about them. So he's very parapsychologically oriented, knows that we have these capacities, trying to expand them for humanity, and he wouldn't go to it with me that we got into altered states and I could
Mm,
communicate with him. There's more to the story, but he wouldn't do it. He
Mm.
just refused. And what I've come to think is like with your girlfriend then is like in order to recognize something, you have to have seen it before. Recognize, cognize, do it again, think of it again. So it might not have been in her mind to be able to notice something like that. Uh, and that's what I've had to deal with over and over again with around synchronicity. People have these experiences, but they got no category for them. And that's what you're doing with the DMT entities is giving us categories so that people can recognize them by having seen them before.
mhm. Yeah, makes sense to me. It resonates. You want to comment on that, Sarah, on telepathy?
Oh my gosh, that's a strange one. It's, I mean, I feel like it's this bizarre specter that's kind of followed me my whole life. And I look at it through different lenses and different intensities and stuff at different parts of my life. But yeah, I had some interesting experiences as a kid, and then they kind of freaked me out. So I put them away, you know, just like coincidences and just like anticipating things before they happened that I had no way of knowing, you know, that it happened and just odd things. And then psychedelics were pretty amazing because in a way, like it can kind of in obviously I'm not saying this is a universal experience, but in my experience, I found that it gave me a way to like tap into that and amplify it, but in a like kind of controlled way if I was, you know, cautious about it. And but totally aside, thinking I had a cautious approach, I had a acid overdose in my early 20s and I was tripping for about 5 days, but there was an amazing thing that happened earlier on in my experience. It was like a New Year's party at a festival kind of forest venue. So I was in the forest. It was lovely. No better place to have an overdose in a familiar forest. But what was crazy was that I felt as I was coming up that there was a sort of radio network of other people who were very high as well, like also on acid in mega doses. And I realized one of them was the DJ. And I was talking with my friend at the time, and I was kind of describing my experience in the moment of, you know, feeling this network in my mind and realizing that it's other people at the party and that one of them's a DJ. And I was like, oh, for science, I'm going to just, you know, that, like a rude, clumsy child, of course, just throw a banana peel out there and see what happens with this DJ set. And I did it, and what we call it train wrecking it, where, you know, you just sort of mess up their groove. And the party heard it, and everybody shouted out, "Ah!" the way they do at a party when someone kind of messes up the set. And I felt terrible. I was like, "Oh, I just messed up this person's set." But then I also thought to myself, you know, like I need additional confirmation. I was talking with my friend, as I mentioned, and they noticed. And so it was nice to have that moment where you're like, oh, wow, this is like being validated right now. Someone else saw it, right? Because I counted it off for them in real time. It terrified them. And I mean, I was high enough that it wasn't scary to me because I just felt like, you know, clumsy, rude kid messing with someone's set. But I did it again for the science of it. And I was like, okay, that's enough. And I didn't mess with anybody else in the network for the rest of that evening or that trip. But it was something that stayed with me because it really felt like this antenna had sort of, you know, metaphysically manifested out of my crown chakra and was able to pick up deeper signals and able to like emit deeper signals. And it was a really like foundational psychedelic visionary experience for me in my younger years. But yeah, it really dovetailed with a lot of my other like sober sort of parapsychological experiences.
No, that reminds me when I was in college, I used to have lunch every day and sit on this little hill. And I used to practice this experiment where I'd watch people, walk by back and forth, and I used to try to make them scratch their heads or do something. And it seemed like I had this remarkable ability to make people do it. I don't know how frequent it actually was, but what you just said reminded me. I wonder if people stare at me sometimes and make me do things.
Mhm.
If they know what they're doing. On the dance floor, I can sometimes think about I want somebody to dance with me, and they do. A friend of mine just sent me a, a little reel of her saying "I love you" in various ways to a few leaves on a tree. I love you, come to my voice. I love you, come to my voice. And the leaves caressed her face. Okay. Well, well, with that, we'll go on to another important question here. As you do your taxonomy, um, and you also have raised the question about how we know it's not our own projections, but there is something real out there. And we, uh, we, the three of us here, are pretty sure there's something out there. Hey, it's something out there, man. I don't know what it is, but it's there. You know what I'm saying? We know it's out there. How do how do each of you talk about separating your own projections, your own ideas onto the stuff that's floating around out there?
Yeah, so that's the big mystery. I mean, how do I know you're real right now? I mean, what method do I use for assessing, other human beings, whether they're real? I mean, it comes down to a leap of faith. I mean, it's very, very hard. I mean, we don't have a scientific measure of consciousness. I mean, there's no way to know if these beings that we're encountering on DMT actually have an independent existence or not. All I can say is that that they feel realer than real. There's an absolute sense of they surprise you by what they're saying. It seems like they say things that they know more about you than you know yourself. They know things that you don't know that they share with you. But we whether they're projections of our own mind and or whether they're actually independent beings existing on their own terms with their own consciousness is something we may never actually know for sure. And in fact, that may even be the wrong question to ask because like you said, I think they undoubtedly have some sense of reality because there's a consistency among the reports that people have shared experiences. And one of the things that they're doing right now at Imperial College is they're sending people out in teams together to see if they can link up in hyperspace and have shared experiences that they can report back. But it may be the wrong question to ask whether they're.
And they do have shared experiences.
Yeah,
That's the
oh
thing.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, and they do. So it may really be the wrong question to ask because it may be that these beings may be inside of our minds, but our minds may extend beyond our brains, into other dimensions.
Oh, we will make that assumption here, David, because that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
That's synchronicity does that in a simpler way, which my mind is connected to something in my environment. How is that happening? That's synchronicity is really like elementary school for this kind of thinking, but it's basic. You got to learn how to count first. And synchronicity says our minds are part of our environment. That's fundamentally scary, but true principle of synchronicity itself. So we know that. But Sarah, what about you in this question of is it real or is it Memorex? That's an old thing, but how is it real out there or not?
It's interesting because, you know, what is real and what is conscious? Those are obvious go-tos, but I, I'm kind of reminded of an approach that I take with artificial intelligence because there is going to be that gray area where people are interacting with models that aren't sentient, and then there's going to be those models that do develop something that we can all definitively qualify as having sentience. And I also take a page from thinking about it from like a dream logic perspective, because like mystics have regarded dreams as a part of reality forever. And people have dreams all the time that completely can change the way they see their waking life. And so, you know, is it real? It's like, well, we don't know if our life is real. This could be a simulation, you know, and the fact that so much of the experience gives the impression that they know more than we do in their space. And it's like our mind in their space, you know, because it's so completely transformative. Like you're just in another dimension. Um, but that it has that kind of weird dream logic where when you end up there, there's a world happening over there, and you're just popping in for a little bit. And yeah, so I think that it's for me, it's more significant to pay attention to what's happening as opposed to like from a existential level, like define it as whether or not it's real. Because either way, there's so much rich information there that's possible, whether it's like just visual stuff, you know, mathematics, fractal geometry. You know, I've seen things over there that are so much more complex than my mind is able to fabricate. And that lends itself to having some kind of reality, you know, that's outside of my ability to dream up or fabricate.
Well, that's my measure of whether it's real or not. Is it useful? Is what
Hmm.
happens out
Hmm.
there useful? I mean, the simple thing is squeeze my hand. You can see that that's something happening. Uh, when they come up with ideas that are useful for you,
Hmm.
that's means there's something what we'll call real because it works. It works somehow. The question is not the best question, but I think projection is a very important part of human minds because
Hmm.
we do get our distortions going very, very well. And
Hmm.
we do put our own stuff that can be distorted onto other things.
Hmm.
So the projection has a like a bell-shaped curve thing, like the Sarah's ability to visualize or that fantasia thing. There's a bell-shaped curve. Some people ultra, some people much less, a lot of people in between. And the same with this. There's some people who project a lot of their own stuff on there, some that will be able to be quiet enough to be able to absorb what might be different from them and being able to then use it. I mean, in the simple experiment that both of you did. David is a little simpler. Squeeze my hands. Sarah's, I'm going to throw a banana in here and see what happens. But it's the same idea. It's like my son Carlin, like pushing when he's little, he liked pushing buttons to see what would happen. It just things would go
Hmm.
off. So that's how you find out things. That's research to being able to push buttons and see what's going on out there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And just one final on that, this world, this earth that we're living on here, is full of polarities. It's this is polarity central being an earth. And asking the either or, does it exist in reality or not, is really the wrong question because there is there is the fact that our minds are much more expanded potentially, and your experiences and what you're writing about shows that. But we're also, I'm me too. I got a self, and I don't want to obliterate the self the way some people want to, and it becomes a form of spiritual bypassing so they forget about this reality. We're here, and there's a good reason to be here. This is a this could be a lot of more fun with our bodies here on Earth. And as we talk about this body thing, I want to go back to the artificial intelligence reference because AI is a non-bodied intelligence.
Well, is it really non-bodied? I mean, it's bodied in a computer. I mean, it's in computer circuitry. It has a physical, correspondence. And I also wonder even if the beings that we're encountering in hyperspace are actually bodiless. And they may just, I mean, they often appear to have bodies in their, in their reality. Octopus type entities, self-transforming machine elves. They see, when I was in hyperspace and this praying mantis entity was operating on my brain, it seemed like I had some kind of representation there. It just didn't correspond to the, this level, this
Hmm.
physical level of reality, but there may be some other levels of reality that maybe maybe they vibrate at different frequencies or something like that, where they have bodies at that level, or in that way. So I'm not really sure if that's really out of body or just differently embodied.
That's
Does that
where I
answer?
think
Yeah.
that's where I think the AI metaphor is very helpful. And what you just said is that AI has a body, not a human body, not flesh and blood, and it may be a representation of bodies that look like they have no physical body. They just don't have a body like ours.
Yeah, I mean, what about virtual reality? I mean, are you bodiless in virtual reality, or or I mean, the avatars that we use in virtual reality? I mean, is that a body or not? I mean, it becomes kind of a more of a philosophical question, because everything can come down to just information on one level, and what we're really doing is just transferring information, and representations of bodies are just really configurations of information.
Sarah?
I was daydreaming about my different perspectives in VR, like VR chat and just the other platforms where people socialize and stuff, and just like thinking about, um, you have an avatar over there, and that's sort of your semblance of self for other people to pinpoint your locality, but you don't have a sensory feedback in the same way that an AI, you know, um, in its rudimentary sense is going to be on a computer and that's its body, but it's not really the same kind of like avatar representation until it gets into another program, whether that's VR chat or something like that. But the training sets that they're giving AI now to embody them are that they're rapidly accelerating this past year, and with all different kinds of body forms and stuff too. So I think it's interesting because like there's definitely visual representations of bodied entities over there. And so, you can't really like take it as a one-to-one with corporality, but you can definitely say like, okay, that is an individual machine elf. I've definitely seen distinguished entities, even if, some categories have like hive mind looking kinds of interactions or vibes, or my interactions with them give me the impression that they're like connected in some way that normal humans aren't to one another. But yeah, it's interesting because going back to the projection thing, like we are essentially like projecting these categories onto these entities,
Yeah.
and I thought a lot about that because there are similarities between them if you strip them of all of their normal context culturally, and historically or whatever. Like there are goblins that look like kobolds, that look like demons, that look a little bit like elves, that look a little bit like clowns, and so I'm wondering really like what are we looking at over there, and is it the feeling of it that really makes us like choose what stamp to give it a label? There are more exotic ones, as David mentioned, octopus, and tentacled things, and I've encountered entities like that as well. I've encountered a lot of different kinds, and it is difficult for me to think that they're all the same ecological kind of beings because they are so different. And in my personal experience, they kind of come across very raw visually, and then your brain tries to sort out what you're looking at, right? But just from that initial first trip, I found that my brain is pretty good at trying to see past the projections, and that was a part that made the process of creating the images for the book pretty fun, because the AI the large language model image generator stuff, it's almost like painting with a collective consciousness, because it's aggregating, all of the art it's witnessed and kind of giving you this distilled symbolic representation of, everybody's mental image of different things, whether that's elves or octopus or, you know, even exotic things like machine elves.
Yeah, our definitely our brains have certain ways of wanting to understand visually what's we're seeing.
Mhm.
And how many times have I seen like a number that I wanted to see, but it really wasn't that number,
Mhm.
and then I had to look again. So we
Mhm.
do bring our own projections, and whether they're from a central source and they're all similar somehow or not, that's for that's the next level of what you're doing is being you categorize them and study them and
Mhm.
seeing what they have in common because they have something in common. They show up DMT, UFOs, and sometimes in ordinary states, like a mutual acquaintance of ours, friend of ours, Lori Weber, could make them happen just when she was in a regular state of consciousness. She could get to be able to experience them, and this is what this. There's something there. There's here. We don't know yet, but you're beginning. You're expanding our ability to understand how our minds work and how the mind that we are immersed in is functioning.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I want to comment a little bit on that. I mean, it is interesting that our cultural interpretations and expectations certainly play a role. I mean, there's no question that people with, Christian backgrounds, tend to see Jesus or the Virgin Mary or things like that. But then there are these really remarkable cases where people encounter beings that they don't recognize, but then a couple of weeks later, we'll see, in sort of, they'll be looking through a book on Egyptian mythology or on Hindu deities, and they'll be like, "Ah, that's the being that I saw," and so sometimes they see things that are outside of their cultural understanding, and that's a little bit more of a mystery. It may be evidence of their independent existence or of Carl Jung's, collective unconscious of archetypes that they're tapping into, but it is sometimes that their own cultural interpretation doesn't play a role or doesn't seemingly play a role in sometimes what people encounter.
yeah. And what do you make out of the repeated reports of people of various different religions and no religion having near-death experiences and encountering a loving, apparently person emanating radiance and warmth and the perfect kind of love that people like to have, which many people call Jesus.
Yeah, it's fascinating how consistent that is, right? I mean, that's remarkable. I sure hope that's what's waiting for me after I die. That's all I can say.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah.
And some Jews report that he's also funny. Uh, but it may not be just for Jews, but that's one of the things I just read today.
I
Well,
remember hearing that sometimes children, though, who have no religious upbringing, when they have near-death experiences, they encounter cartoon characters or Mickey Mouse. So I'm not
Oh,
really sure how much of a role our cultural interpretation plays in the near-death experience, but there certainly is a general positivity and lovingness that's reported, and I think that's remarkable.
and that's most consistent no matter what happens in getting out there, that
Yeah,
the universe is love. It
mhm.
ain't,
yeah.
it ain't, it ain't love down here, ladies and gentlemen. It ain't love down here. And and because it's not love here, why don't we all just kill ourselves and go for the love that seems like it's out there?
Well, this is the thing is that if you read about near-death experiences, they're remarkably consistent in the way we just mentioned in terms of positivity and lovingness, with one exception. And that's when people who have attempted suicide. Those are people that tend to find themselves in a dark space or a demonic space or hell-like environments. So it seems like that's sort of the one area where people haven't consistently reported this positive, loving presence when they're in the midst of a near-death experience.
Well, what we're talking about here is like we don't know,
Yeah.
but we're gathering information, and fundamental to that information is there's more going on that our minds can be in contact with, and our hearts. I think it's important to make sure love becomes part of this, and other emotions as well, because we are more heart than mind in many ways, and that we need to be able to recognize that again, the psychosphere has energy in it as well as information. It's just not mind, it's just not left brain, it's intuition and feeling. And the feeling is an important part of all these experiences, but we use these clumsy words to be able to communicate, and they tend to be more abstract. And so part of the time when Sarah was talking and got deep into what she was thinking about and trying to describe, I could climb up your words and be in that LSD thing out in the forest and see all that vibration going on among and between the people, and I could see you throw your banana peel in the middle of it, the thing go like that. I mean, became a visual, and that is a clearer way of communicating that we might be able to get to, which from my point of view, what you are describing points in many ways, but for me, it's the potential for whatever we mean by telepathy that we can't explain, where we communicate in deep empathy with the other person. And that's what I'm looking for. That's what I think humanity desperately needs right now, is a big jump in capacity for empathy. And words just get in the way, as one song that I like to sing has in it. Words just get in the way sometimes. And can the words be used to connect and then non-verbally be able to do that? Well, I'm going to get to one of the questions that I showed you that I am most interested in now as I write this book, A Psychotherapy for the Collective Human Organism, because I'm a psychiatrist, I do psychotherapy, and I'm trying to put the human organism on the couch or in the chair, really, and across from me or some therapist, and help get the anger out of them. That's mostly what I'm looking at, is like the rage and the separation that we have, and being able to be empathic in better ways than we do now is so important. So my question for you, each of you having much interaction with these beings, what do they have to say, if anything, about how to help us humans here walking around on Earth? What do they have to tell us, guide us, advise us about what to do with the terrible anger and hate and nastiness and apathy that much of the world is experiencing?
Well, one of the most consistent transmissions or communications that I hear from people who have experiences more with ayahuasca, the shamanic brew from the Amazon, or with magic mushrooms, is a communication about the importance of developing ecological awareness, about developing a greater sensitivity to the environment, and this is also just common, I think, with psychedelic experiences in general, where the boundaries between you and the environment begin to blur and break down, and people begin to understand that what they do to the environment, they're really doing to themselves. Um, I think that's probably, that's because we're in such a climate crisis right now. I think that's one of the most important messages that people bring back. Um, And I think that the whole experience of boundaries blurring, between not only you and your environment, but between you and other people, helps to foster greater empathy between one another. And I agree with you. Nothing is more important than that right now.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think that in the various ways, the overarching theme has been about the interconnectedness of the cosmos, and so we all have these like little individual nodal lives, but just being able to tap into the greater lineage of it, because we only experience ourselves in our own little moment in the cosmos. But from that first experience I had, where I had that kind of uh, review of cosmic history, to later on, and I asked questions. I'm like, oh, well, who are you? Like, what is this? What's going on? And they were like, we're you, you're us, we're all the same stuff. This is the thing going on. And to later experiences where they have been sort of curious in the same way that we're curious about them, and it's like dimensions meeting. So I think that it's just like an invitation to be that loving, positive, curious, growing consciousness that, we all want to embody but encounter. And just I think that being in touch with the heart is easily the most important part of being an explorer in this space, because it's very harrowing, but at the same time, like the the emotional payoff's really incredible when you get to encounter the other. And so it's really like at the end of the day, it's a lesson about the other, but like transcending that like we are really all connected and we are really all one. Yeah.
Well,
Sorry, I got
we're-
all teary-eyed, man. It made me get a tissue. I'm like, oh, that was a question.
well, you were talking about the heart, and your heart popped up into your head,
Yeah.
and it started. That's what happened.
Yeah.
Um, my question, and still is on the practical side. Of course, what Sarah said, what David, you just said, um, are part of what I think. Better connection with the natural world, open our hearts to each other and what's around us in a greater sense. Um, how do we get people to do that?
Yeah, that's a really big question. I mean, that's why I think that we're going through a psychedelic renaissance right now. I think that's why so many people are doing psychedelics. I don't know of anything else that will turn somebody around overnight, like Scrooge in the Christmas Carol, where they just have this one profound experience where they suddenly feel like their heart opening to all of humanity and to wanting to take care of the environment. I don't think there's very much time left right now in terms of our ecological crisis, and I think that psychedelic plants are nature's way of sort of sending out signals into the biosphere, which is the global body, as a way of waking people up. I really think that that's the great value that they have. I don't know of any other way really, that has such a quick and profound effect to open people up. Certainly, doing everything you can to communicate what you've learned, to improve communication channels. I mean, the internet, I think, has helped to help expand ideas, but I really do see tremendous value in the psychedelic experience for helping to improve empathy and open people up, open people's hearts up in the way that you're describing.
And Sarah?
I think that in tandem with something like David is suggesting, like finding a way to culturally communicate that people are ready for like a recalibration of the incentive values in society, the way we all participate in this thing. Because on one level, there's the functionality aspect of it, like, granted, we're not living in Atlantis, we're also not living several hundred years ago. So the quality of life for a great many people is at a place that even though, they have first world problems, there's a lot of complacency built in. But I think finding a way for people to understand the long-term value of like shifting the incentive matrix so that people can be fulfilled, but still get the functionality done and maintain the quality of life while society is able to shed a lot of these extractive, negative cultural artifacts, just the will to power kind of thing that has been a big part of the historical reality living in this dimension for as long as human memory has been. But I think that just like people being brave enough to like think new ideas and have the patience to lay them out, because we do create our own reality and we've let other people create it for a long time in terms of because everybody wants utopia, but it's not something that just happens with it's the head and the heart have to be aligned for that to happen. There's so many powerful hearts in the world who want that utopian dream, but the practical necessity of like human life has put a limiter on that for so long. And I think that finally we're at a place where, with psychedelics and with the internet and being able to have global town halls and just people share ideas that are going to be able to go beyond just cultural echo chambers, because that's what I mean, that's what cultures are at the end of the day, kind of like what Terence McKenna was saying, is like culture's not your friend, but that having that neuroplasticity built into psychedelics that give people an opportunity to like reevaluate how they're building their realities within their own life, but then other people too. So I think that like that's an abstract approach to how to do it, but people have been trying to do it, coalitions or petitions or this, or vote this guy in, vote that guy in. I think it's like a systems approach thing that needs to shift, because people are trying to change it within the mental framework that they've already been operating in for so long, which was given to them. They need to find their own. They need to work together and build their own new way of thinking about it.
And what I'm working on, I saw a reference to the ability of the human mind to self-observe.
Yeah.
This is, you too can observe your own minds very well and report what goes on in your minds. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. You see it and can describe it. And your mind is your own paint or easel. It's where you see this stuff because you start with your own mind. You have well-developed self-observers. I'm looking at what Sarah's talking about, developing a new set of frameworks about the future, which include our minds are connected with each other, but it includes developing an aggregate. I like how Sarah says she aggregates the paintings of the past using AI. I'm talking about aggregating the self-observers of humanity and creating a collective self-observer, which then looks at the movies that we are running as a collective mind,
Mhm.
the kind of delusions in it, the falsifications in it, the limits in it, and that we use that self-observer capacity we have for our own minds to develop a new movie. I'm using the visual for the future of humanity because we do have the ability to influence what's around us by what we think and what we imagine. We need to have the courage collectively to imagine what the two of you are talking about having happened, but it has to be a collective imagination to see how that movie works with not only, oh, we're all connected, there's love all around, but how do we get people fed? How do we get it so that we all can play, is my way of thinking about it, is because play is the best form of research. You have fun and you learn. That's play. You have fun and you. How can we have enough of our material needs met, and then how can we learn how to get along with each other better? It's my thing to say we don't get along with each other. It's to me that's the biggest problem of us, of all of this. There's many problems, but the empathy is one way of talking about it. But we don't know how to talk, whatever that means, with each other. We don't know how to comment. Look, what you said to me, I could say to somebody, really hurt my feelings. I'd like to be able to talk with you about how I felt when you got mad at me for no good reason. A very good friend of mine, I've known for 12 years, refuses to do it and cut off our relationship. And
Yeah.
she's a therapist.
Mhm.
And that's just to illustrate what you see in spiritual groups where they fight with each other for who's the best something or other. Uh, and these are the things that I also am trying to address with the collective self-observer, these maladaptive patterns of interaction that then in the microcosm, not just how do you get fed, but how do you talk with each other in a way that you communicate with each other what you want to have felt and experienced by the other person.
Well, hopefully our telepathic abilities are improving, because I think that's one of the ways that we can become more empathic.
That's why I started with that question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have one more question, then we'll end. One of my favorite things you've mentioned a couple of times in your book, echo. I like the name. Behold, behold, echo homo, ecce homo, Earth Coincidence Control Office. I mean, John Lilly came up with that one. I had an experience out in the forest one time going up into a tube and then this wide area that was kind of gray and foggy that I felt was it was ECHO, the Earth Coincidence Control Office. For those of you who don't know what ECHO does, it does what it sounds like it does. It makes synchronicities happen for people. They're, how they do that is kind of fun to imagine. It's the beginning of maybe the lowest down F, echelon of maybe this is a simulation or whatever it is. Something could be injecting itself in the experiences that we have with each other and with our world around us. So, can you tell me what you know about Echo, and then we'll have to end.
Well, John Lilly was a very dear friend of mine, by the way, and yeah,
Great.
I spent a lot of time with John. I think John was being pretty playful when he developed that idea of echo. It's really his playful term for synchronicity. The term that Carl Jung coined. Um, I'm not really sure what I can tell you. Do you want me to tell you one of my coincidences experiences? Is that what you want me to share, or?
No, that you know John, and of course he's playful. That's what he would do. That so just like there was a trickster element in him, as far as I could tell. I didn't know him personally, but I read a bunch of his stuff early on. Wrote some of his early stuff. I'm just up saying that I traveled up, I thought, into what was Echo, the echo chamber.
Mhm.
I just thought of that one, the echo chamber up there. So I was hanging around up there, and I knew there was stuff going on. Please don't feel like you have to respond to this. It's playful, it comes up with new ideas. That's the way we come up with stuff. So that echo thing really echoed with me and made me wonder because I'm reading a book called The Coincidence Makers. I did read that about a group of supposed people who created coincidences, and it described how they did it. And that's a very primitive version of what I think Echo does. I mean, the idea that you and I know Lori Weber from the past is just a fun but very interesting and somber kind of connection between us. That how does that happen? It just what it does is that it's a small shared coincidence that's highly meaningful to each of us, and it makes us feel a little closer to each other. And that's what synchronicities can do when they're shared and talked about with each other. So I think there's stuff you call it virtual reality, but I like John's idea that in the psychosphere, where I'll put it, is echo hanging around. And we can communicate with some of those guys because they're communicating with us, and they may have something to do with the elves and whatever and the other entities. I don't know. It's just fun for my imagination that John triggered for me.
Yeah, no, I've had many remarkable coincidences in my life, and they're usually of a very personal nature, and oftentimes describing them to other people, they don't seem quite as profound as they seem
Right.
to you. But
Right.
when they happen to you, it's often like a lightning bolt. They're so powerful. So yeah, it's a bit of a mystery. I think for me, I see it as evidence that the universe is really one big giant mind. That it's that I tend to see that matter evolved out of mind, not vice versa, the way that many traditional scientists assume that there was this long period of the Big Bang and the physical universe and solar systems and life on Earth, and then finally at the end of this long process, consciousness just somehow evolves as sort of it's sort of the last thought. But I think it was there from the beginning, and I think that synchronicities are kind of evidence that the universe is really one big universal mind.
Sarah, as we end, final comment?
I couldn't help but think about this wonderful little movie called I Heart Huckabees.
Yeah,
And
a lot of coincidences in that one.
yeah, yeah, just the thought that coincidences bring people together. And I think that that has been such a magical part of DMT culture is people discovering that one another have similar experiences. You know, it might just be on like the Erowid trip reports from back in the day, and people kind of finding one another online and being like, whoa, that sounds like what I saw. There's just something so special about that in an ephemeral realm like that. So I think that it's really fitting that that's, you know, become kind of a new lens for me to look at the DMT experience as a whole. So thank you for that. Thank you for that perspective that that in and of itself is like a part of the fabric of these like greater cosmic coincidences.
Tell me more clearly than I received what it was that you just got.
I hadn't really looked at like the perspective of the DMT phenomenon from the lens of a coincidence specifically. And that at the end of the day, that's really what it is. You know, it's like when someone says, I saw elves, and then someone says, I saw elves, you know, and it's just that holy shit moment. And then, you know, somebody else is lonely and they're like, I saw octopuses. And then they might be on Erowid like weeks later and they're like, oh, this person saw octopuses, you know, octopi, whatever. And I think that like that journey for the psychedelic community over the past couple decades has been really special. And I feel like David and I's publication is kind of like the party. You know, that's how it felt to me. We brought a lot of other really incredible artists on board. I know that like, you know, I get to sit here and have these wonderful conversations with you as like the glory part of being one of the main contributing artists, but we had a lot of our friends and colleagues share their visions about it too. So it's really cool to flip through it and it like viscerally experience the coincidence, seeing all these artistic styles that have this strange thread in common, you know. Yeah, so that was my takeaway. Thank you for helping me see that like the elves in and of themselves like are little living coincidences.
Wonderful, wonderful. Uh, and so it's a wonderful coincidence that you published your book, and I found it. I got
Yeah.
this. I got the same publisher. But when I saw that, uh, and I interviewed Rick Strassman about a month ago on this show, and we got into the Bible more than the entities. I wanted to do the entities. Uh, and David Luke has not responded to any emails, but I know you're close with him too. You have gotten me what I really was looking for with this. I wanted to know what these things are out there that is a shared experience of multiple people. And that sharingness of a similar experience goes with synchronicity between people, a shared synchronicities, which is what I'm now making videos on this podcast about with people with whom I have shared synchronicities. And we talk about it from both sides, which is not unlike what you've done, is hear people talk about the same, this and that one, and you put them together. But when you get people who are on DMT or some other psychedelic and they have the same experience, as we used to say, far out and groovy, baby. Far out and groovy. So thank you both very, very much. It's it's really been fun. Magical is where we started, and magical is where we end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you very
Mhm.
much.
Very honored. Thank you. It was a lot of fun.